Please. Okay. Professor Eric Storm, first of all, thank you for accepting this interview. You wrote a book, recently translated into Romanian, on the history of nationalism at a time when we are clearly seeing a strong comeback, if not of nationalism itself, then of political platforms that make heavy use of nationalism. How do you see this comeback, this new rise of nationalism?
Yeah, well, that's difficult. I think I think social media have a lot to do with it. So on social media, the algorithms, they really stimulate short, simple messages, simple images, polarizing and extreme opinions. So it's an ideal platform for propagating extreme nationalism. I think another factor is that the older generation, so those who really lived through the horrors of the Second World War or the times of colonial empires, so they now slowly disappear. So the taboo also on open nationalism, on expressions of xenophobia, of racism, this taboo seems to slowly disappear, and so it flourishes on social media. And I think especially part of the younger generations are very susceptible to these messages. And then there are these populist politicians that really use these simple slogans and this fierce nationalism to well try to win elections, and apparently this seems to work. And so yeah, I think to us from an older generation it comes a bit as a surprise. Yeah.
Of course. In your book, you avoid this so-called moral trap. Nevertheless, how did nationalism come to be associated with extremism? Was there a ground zero moment?
Yeah, well, that's also difficult. So I think there has been a slow shift, and so I argue when I wrote the book, my last chapter started with 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, but it didn't work. So in the end, I decided to start my last chapter in 1979
with Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, so 1979 is both the start or the breakthrough moment of neoliberalism. So the opening of markets, the downsizing of the welfare state, liberalization of the economy. But this also meant that political debates were not anymore on economic issues. So Thatcher argued there is no alternative. We should be competitive in the international market. And so political debate shifted slowly to identity issues. And so we see this in the Iranian Revolution, which is so the rise of political Islamism, also in 1979. But it's also the moment when Hindu nationalism became important again. So it's a slow evolution, but Modi now culminates this and is in power since 2014. It is also the same moment when in the United States the evangelicals mobilized politically with moral majority, and they have an enormous impact on the Republican Party. And so they also use traditional morals, free trade, but also conservative norms and values. So clearly a reaction against the liberty of the 1960s. And so you see that slowly identity politics becomes more important, but also identity politics also in a one could argue more positive sense as a a movement of emancipation, for instance, of the African Americans, Native Americans, all kind of indigenous groups in the Americas, the Sami in Scandinavia. So you also see that there is more self-esteem or self-awareness among all kind of minorities. You also see a process of decentralization. So in Spain, you get the state of autonomy, so that all regions get local autonomy. The same happened in Belgium, where Flanders got autonomy. In Great Britain, where Wales and Scotland got their own government and parliament. So it is both a kind of process of emancipation of minorities, probably also the LGBT community. And on the other side, it is also majorities, especially conservative religious groups in the Christian, Catholic, Protestant world, but also in the Islamic world and Hindu world. So you see that identity, who are we, what is our collective identity, becomes more important and is also connected to nationalism. So what is the nation?
So, and all these secondary identities, so-called secondary identities, like religion, like race, and so on.
Yeah, and I think it's also a change of perspective. So the immediate post-war period was very future-oriented. So rebuilding after the Second World War. In the communist world, it was building a modern communist society, industrialization. In the Third World, it was development and building huge dams and large-scale industrial projects. It was building a welfare state and the Wirtschaftswunder in Germany and in Japan. So economic progress really was what people were striving for. And then identities were not that important. So you see that when Nasser in Egypt built the Aswan Dam, a lot of ancient temples would disappear in the new lake, and in the end they were saved, but he gave them away to other countries because, well, Egypt has already enough temples, and so the idea of national heritage was not, there was not much awareness. And I think, well, in Romania with Ceausescu, there was very little awareness for most of the old national heritage. And this only began to change as well in the 1970s. It's the time when UNESCO starts the World Heritage List, and where national heritage becomes more important, and you see new museums, more awareness of restoring ancient buildings. And so there's a shift from the 1950s and 60s. We're very forward looking to a better future. And what we're now doing is looking backwards. Where do we come from? Who are we? And I think it's often a bit I think it's a bit exaggerated. So probably we should not think of traumas of the past or heritage of the past. We should also look at the options for the future, and also, well, threat of climate change, for instance. So this is a huge challenge for all of us, and we should probably not look into our navels, but look to the future and to the outside world.
Yeah, but it is easier, I believe, for populist politicians to speculate the past, not the future, you know?
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah.
So not to speculate fears for identity, for losing your identity, instead of speculated, I don't know, hope.
Yeah. So this ideology of speaking about roots and our identity, and so there's a lot of talk about that, but in a way, I think in the 1960s, when people spoke about identity, it was about personal identity. And you go to a psychologist to talk about who am I and what are my personal problems and so on. And when we now speak about identity, it's a collective identity.
Yeah. And collective traumas.
Yeah, and it's a bit a chimera. It's a bit like the Volksgeist of the 19th century. I always tell my students when they use the word the spirit of the people, the Volksgeist or the Zeitgeist, spirits do not exist, and they're mere ideas. They're not very real.
Yes, but look what did Zeitgeist in history.
Yeah.
Because it was fascist all over the Europe because of this Zeitgeist.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
So we usually say that nationalism is often opposed to patriotism. Do you think that they are essentially different or just two sides of the same coin?
So nationalism and patriotism?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you also, in one of your questions, you wrote if there is a good and a bad nationalism. So I think on the one hand, we should not leave the term nationalism and the nation and defending the nation to right-wing populists, because all politicians defend the interest of the nation. So I would argue that all politicians, even left-wing politicians, they are nationalist because they want the best for the nation. But what you have is different interpretations of what is the nation. And so some are more open, others have a more, some are more cosmopolitan, international cooperation, the collective whole, not just of our country, but also of our neighbors or the entire European Union. And others are more, we should politics and policy should there be for our people and not give money to others, and our national interests are above all else. So these are two different conceptions, but I would argue that it's good to try to that we should not leave those who call themselves nationalists to monopolize the term nationalism, because in a sense, in today's world, everybody is nationalist. So we all enjoy the victory of our football team, our national team. Next week, the Winter Olympics start. Everybody's glued to the television, and we cheer our national heroes that gain medals over there. So this nationalism is something that is present everywhere in today's world. But I'm also a bit hesitant to distinguish between good and bad. So I in my book I use two different terms for the nation. So there's the demos, which is the community of citizens, regardless of the language or the culture they have. And then the ethnos conception, so which defines the nation in a more limited way as a community with the same language, the same culture. And so the demos conception is older. So I would argue that nationalism arises with this more cosmopolitan, open version of nationalism. But the romantic idea of the nation as a cultural community, this is what nowadays is most widespread. And if people speak about nationalism, they think of this type of nationalism. And I would argue we should focus more on nationalism as the demos, all citizens, regardless. Well, I know that in Romania there are a lot of minorities, English, German-speaking minority, Hungarian-speaking. The Jewish population largely disappeared, but also the Sinti and Roma. Everybody with a Romanian passport is member of the Romanian nation, and so this is the demos conception. And I think the ethnos, so who are the real Romanians, are
the
only
good,
those.
the good American, the good Dutch, the good German.
Yeah. Yeah, and so migrants are always a problem in that view, even if they have citizenship. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, the migrant population from Moroccan or Turkish origin, even if they are born in the Netherlands, these from this ethnic conception of the nation, they are seen as guests or as a threat that really threatens our national culture. And so this is, from this perspective, this becomes a problem. But from the demos conception, they have citizenship, they can vote, they have the same rights as everybody else. So these are two different conceptions, and in most cases you have a bit of both. But there are extreme cases. So now the most extreme nationalists, they really embrace this ethnic, pure conception of the nation that is really xenophobic and racist in many cases. Yeah, and this is really well, a bit problematic.
I'm curious, what do you think about this theory, the anxiety of being replaced, that is used, for example, by MAGA in the United States?
Yeah. So I think this is a very extreme and openly racist theory. And if you listen to Trump, the way he speaks about the Somali population, formerly the Mexicans, so they're all rapists and criminals, and so this is really, even though the United States conquered half of Mexico, so New Mexico, Arizona, California, they all belong to Mexico someday, and they also annexed the population living there. So one could even argue that in California they argue that their heritage is older than the heritage in New England, because the Spaniards arrived in California before the English arrived in New England. So that is even the more original. But again, these are debates. What is the nation and what is the nature of the nation? And yeah.
In Romania, for example, but not only here, across Europe, one of Russia's hybrid strategies has been to amplify this nationalist currents by encouraging far-right movement. So is nationalism also a weapon of war, something that can be weaponized nowadays?
In what sense?
Russia, in Romania, one of Russia's hybrid strategies has been to amplify nationalism.
Yeah.
In order to weaponize this nationalism and to create like chaos.
Yeah, no, that's true. And they use social media, are very easy to use in that sense. And I think this is what you see almost everywhere. So there are also discussions whether the first time that Trump was elected, that the Russians really had all kind of bots that amplified his message to the detriment of Hillary Clinton, and that what was a very close election, that it really had impact. And well, in Romania you had this election that was cancelled because of foreign interference. So I think this really is a threat right now, and with the social media now, the bosses of the social media, well, Musk is the clearest example, but I think Facebook and Google now are also very close to Trump. What you see, especially in Twitter, is that these racist and fiercely nationalist messages, they are propagated very, very easily across these social media. And so I think, well, in some countries they now discuss, and I think in Australia they prohibited social media for children until 16 years. And probably that is a healthy measure, not just for the content, but I think also for the social media are very good in polarizing, but also in gluing us to our telephones. And so I think it really has a bad impact on mental health issues of a lot of people as well.
It is not a direct theme of your book, but it is related. And I would really like to know your opinion on what appears to be an open war, an open assault by the MAGA ideology on liberal democracy. It is related with Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and these tech companies. What do you think about this?
A kind of open war between them and between who?
Liberal democracy, between European Union.
Yeah. I think very surprising if you look at it from a distance is that the main opponent nowadays of the United States of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump is the European Union and well the mainstream European political parties and so well this seems a bigger threat than China or Russia. And I also think that in the long term, so in the United States, they speak that in the long run, their main opponent is China. So China is their main rival. But if you have a rival, a big rival that you foresee probably conflict or maybe even war, then you need allies. And Europe is the most logical ally and the most powerful ally for the United States. So it is also kind of contradictory to me. Well, I can understand that they prefer right-wing populist governments to the type of Merkel style of politicians or social democrats like Sanchez in Spain. But really antagonizing the existing governments in Europe is really very strange and well, a few weeks ago it seemed that they would blow up NATO in order to get Greenland, and well, they get a piece of ice and they lose strong allies, which is, I would argue, strategically not very wise to do.
What is the difference between Make America Great Again in Ronald Reagan campaign and Donald Trump campaign? It's the same slogan.
Yeah, well, I think Donald Trump is a very peculiar individual as well, and I sometimes I think he's more of a showman than he is a talented politician. So I think Orban or Erdogan, as politicians, they are smarter and their focus is to stay in power at any costs. And I think Donald Trump's focus is to get attention every day and be the center of attention of the global media every day, and not so much how do I continue to stay in power. And so in many ways he's somewhat contradictory. But I also think what we see is that there is also a trend of aggression. So we see it in Putin invading Ukraine. It is the United States interfering in Venezuela, wanting to annex Greenland. They talk about having the Panama Canal. They want to have Canada as well. So what we see is a kind of return of imperialism as well. So traditionally we thought that imperialism is something of the past, and empires were doomed, and that the future was to the nation state. And so they started with the French and the American Revolution, and then Eastern Europe became independent from the Ottoman Empire and the traditional outdated Austria-Hungary and the Tsarist Empire. These were all old structures, and the nation state was modern and had a future. And then we had the decolonization process. So nowadays, almost all states in the world are nation states. But what we see is that China creates artificial islands in the South China Sea to also annex these territorial waters of their neighboring countries. They want Taiwan. They already incorporated Hong Kong. Russia, it's more obvious. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but before they also intervened in Georgia. You have Transnistria in Moldova,
Chechnya, and so on.
Yeah, and so now we see that Trump is doing the same, and one could argue that Erdogan maybe also interferes in the Kurdish areas of Syria and Iraq, Israel occupying parts of Lebanon and Syria. So it seems that the nation state and respecting national boundaries, that in theory all nation states are equal. So, for instance, in the United States, in the United Nations, all have a seat in the assembly. There are still power differences, but in international law, all nations have an equal status. And what we now see is a kind of return of empire. It's the law of might is right, which is clearly in the case of Putin, which is also how Trump justifies this. We are stronger, and therefore the others should listen to us. And it's also, in principle, I think, to some extent, what Xi Jinping from China wants. So we see a kind of return of empire. It's always slightly different than in the past, but it seems that the world of nation states is slightly, diminishing or disappearing. And the most surprising is that these imperial policies are justified with nationalist rhetoric.
Exactly.
So it's America first. Putin is also very nationalistic. It is Russian values that are under threat, and Xi Jinping as well. So it's very curious. It's a mixture of nationalist rhetoric to justify imperial expansion.
So do you think this is the beginning of a new global order? Or the death of post-Nuremberg order?
Yeah, so it seems like that we are starting, that a new era is starting, and of geopolitics, and I'm not sure. Maybe there is a way back. So the European Union also tries to negotiate trade deals with other middle-sized powers. Well, in Latin America, with India. So they try to continue the world of nation states and equal human rights. Trade deals based on negotiations and having advantages for both parties. And one should also think that if we think of the biggest challenge of the future, I would argue that is climate change. And we need to cooperate. We're all in the same boat. We just have one planet. And instead of fighting each other, and we should work together and collaborate, and so it's difficult. It's not.
Netherlands managed to avoid this nationalist path at the last election, so maybe there is.
Yeah, although I'm not too optimistic, because Wilders did not become the biggest party, but there are some smaller right-wing populists that gained seats. So in fact, the right-wing populists have the same amount of seats as they had before, and so it's now about one third of parliamentary seats. So that's quite considerable, and yeah.
So the question is how to redefine democracy and how to redefine liberalism, because it is crystal clear that that's the problem.
Yeah, and I'm not too optimistic. So on Friday, the new government, so centrist government, so every country now has to pay much more for defense, for the army. And so the plans of our new government is to cut in welfare systems. So the unemployment benefits for people who have health issues, the pensions will go up. So I think if they have their way, within 15 years, people can retire with 70. So well, it will be 68, I think, in the Netherlands, but 70 really. I think a lot of people with if you have a job in a factory or so, or in healthcare, with 70 you're done. There's no time anymore to enjoy.
We have the same debate in Romania, because the debate is how to grow our economies and how to grow our defense at the same time.
Yeah.
Not to take the money from the welfare system.
Yeah. But if you take it from the welfare system, many ordinary people have even more reasons to vote for the populist right, and they seem to be willing to defend that. And I'm not sure if they really do, because in many instances they vote for the same neoliberal policies. But people get very unsatisfied with what the state does for them, and that they are the ones who have to pay a lot of taxes, but they get very little in return, and the state does not really protect them anymore. And,
that's why many young people are declaring themselves leftist because of this.
I think there's a gender difference. It's mostly young women that are moving to the left, and a lot of young men are moving to the extreme right.
I saw this in America too.
So I'm not sure what is going to happen in many marriages.
So from an intellectual perspective, we are living a very interesting history.
No, that's true. It's a very fascinating period to live through, but I hope
for a better world.
If you live in Ukraine, it is an awful period, and so I hope that it doesn't go out of hand in more places.
Yes, it is true. Thank you very much.